So, Pyrrho, what do you think about determinism?
I think Obama's speech on the NSA was a big load of bullshit. I've never seen such a series of lies, and he starts off likening what they do to the Sons of Liberty, because really he's the British, and he would be fucking sending the NSA to spy and arresting them before the Boston Tea Party could occur. So, is that what you asked? No. What? Oh, determinism. I think I can determine things better than most other people.
Brilliant.
No, I think that I obviously do not believe there is a determinism. I believe that there's an indeterminism, but there's also boundary conditions, and things can be determined within boundary conditions. And that I'm a little tired of emphasizing the lack of determinism when the real problem is that people don't seem to think that their opinion matters, and they don't say they believe. If they're batshit insane and you're sane, that obviously you guys should compromise with an idea that is half batshit insane and half sane. And no, I mean, so I'm kind of actually into the determinability of things, even though nothing is, there's no absolute determinism. Obviously, nobody really thinks that there is.
Well, I mean, it all depends on the context. I mean, there's no determinism in the sense that we can never understand it, but I mean, in a theoretical sense, there is a determinism. But I mean, we will
Well, what
never
I
be
mean
able
is,
to,
okay, you'll never be able to determine something. Yeah, exactly. You seem to have gotten what I was saying, is that even the people that believe in determinism, generally, if they're intelligent, they'll also they'll have to say, that doesn't mean I could determine it, like there's an infinite number of facts. But that's all
yeah, I
indeterminism
mean,
is
like, we
about,
can't
is
plug
that you can't
everything
figure it
into a
out.
computer and model the universe. I
Right.
mean, like, we can't put all these equations into a computer and I can see a million years in the future or whatever.
Exactly. So that's all I meant. I mean, obviously there is theoretically an idea of it, and I think it's a useful idea because there's this idea of boundary conditions. You can figure out things. Just because facts aren't determinate doesn't mean that you can't, put bounds on them. That I was born within the 13 years that the universe has existed. Yeah, I wasn't born. If you don't know when I was born, you can determine ahead of time, predetermine that it was sometime in the last, between now and the last 14 billion years, and even less because of other things So there is determinability in it's these boundary conditions. And my problem with a lot of the concepts is it's just the attitude. It's not that it's like there's this idea in philosophy that when you analyze something, you should cut it down into these abstract thoughts. You want to cut like a butcher at the joints, or, at the right place where the cut is clean and you've actually separated something that is a whole into parts where it cleaves well. And classical ideas about determinism are good. I think doesn't exist. And it's kind of like free will or unfree will. Both of those are bad ideas. The will isn't free or unfree. There's power and energy, there's physical transformations, and there's other ways to think about that stuff.
Have you seen the video where Machio Kaku says that like quantum physics proves that there is free will or something?
Yes, I've seen it, and I hate that guy now.
He doesn't even like explain
The
why.
argument.
Like he doesn't give an argument, but I'm just wondering like I've heard people say the same thing, so what do you think about
Well,
I
even
think
even
that
if they
quantum.
think there's free, even if they think there's free will, don't they acknowledge that there's major influences, like external influences that you have no control over, who they can still affect you?
Right. On a psychological level. Exactly, yeah.
But they say that like there's some things that you can't control, but they think like a heroin addict can like choose to not do heroin if they try hard enough.
Well, those are the interesting questions, actually. Is like, well, how hard do you have to try, and how much is by your metabolism, and how much can you change your metabolism, and can you have a treatment that changes your metabolism that allows your willpower to be strong enough, and so on and so forth. So the thing about quantum mechanics is, I do think that there's a relationship between mechanics, and if you look at the history of thinking about will before quantum mechanics was on the on the scene, will happens, and if it's an illusion, fine, like the sun rising, it's an illusion. There's still some phenomena, right, that word is talking about. Maybe the sun isn't rising and the earth is spinning, but something's going on there. There is a phenomena. It's not like spring. It's its own phenomena, will. And frankly, it bears a lot of resemblance to the way things work in quantum mechanics. Observer effects, the role of information, and the fact more than one thing seems possible, even though one thing always happens in the end. So it's not just like that quantum mechanics is strange and will is strange, so maybe they're related. But a lot of mystics use it that way. They don't understand quantum mechanics. But I do think that the brain is a quantum computer, and that there's a good chance we'll find out that quantum computers are at the basis of life, and that, yes, that's where the subjective experience comes from and our sense of will comes from. And if it's all an illusion, fine. I still think that there's a good chance that a big part of what we experience is because of quantum mechanics. Well, what's anarcho-primitivism? Is it like anarcho-capitalism, except for that you go back to nature, or what is that? I think I might have heard of it, but I assume it's a communistic anarchism where you go back to agriculture society or something. Yeah, I'm not for that. But I also am not for what I'm for. I mean, I don't believe anymore in what I wish would happen. I think that it's been superseded by what is going to happen. And on the one hand, humans are going to get Borg-like and more organized into a superorganism where they don't really think. And some of us can be the kind of bacteria that live in the human body and depend on the human body, which of course there's like 10 times more bacterial cells, they now know, in your body than of your own cells. They're tinier, so they don't weigh more, but there's a higher number of them. And that's how it's going to be. Humans are going to be living in society, and some of us are going to depend on society to get rid of our garbage and our waste and whatnot. But we won't really be part of it. Just like the bacteria that co-live with us but don't have our genes. They don't come from the same egg, but they are given to us by our mother, just like our genes are, and our father, and we live with them. And humans are going to be those two kinds. Some of them are going to be huge conformists like the Borg, and will just continue to be slaves of fashion, and whatever's popular music is the kind of music they like. What a coincidence. And so on and so forth. And a small percentage, 10%, will be individuals that still try to benefit off of, body temperature and things like that.
Well, I mean, I think you're right in a sense, but I mean, I just disagree that humanity will last that long. I mean, I just don't see the universe almost tolerating us chemically for us to reach that results.
Well, okay, let's say that it takes millions of years to get to the level I was just talking about here and now and metaphorically. But let's take it literal like H.G. Wells's time machine, and we actually, we look different, and the evolution. So that's at least, it's 6 million years between us and chimps, a chimp-like state. So that would be hundreds of millions of years before you change. So would we live that long? Yeah, I don't know. That's a toss-up. But part of my thinking on that is like, what about the fallback? Let's say we nuke the fuck out of each other and we poison each other and we create killer robots that keep off of solar energy, keep killing humans till they break down. God, I just see humans surviving. We survive in the snow. We survive in the everything. I just see.
Yeah, I know, but we would
we've got down to what,
more
a couple
bug-like.
thousand people, they say.
It would just become more bugs.
Oh, I see. Well, I do think we're going to be like bugs, because what I'm saying is kind of we're going to become like ants, where ants act on the intelligence level of the hive. They're so, and yet I've watched a lot of ants. They're not as conformist as we might think. I mean, individual ants just go off and do crazy shit. I mean, they don't stay in that ant line, but most of them do long enough for it to be like a hive mind. So I think, yeah, we will become like bugs, but we're going to be like human bugs and with a hive that travels to other stars and shit, And I don't really want to be part of that. I always want to be part of the individual. I'd rather be part of the, let me just make proteins for you guys. I'm good at that. And we'll cooperate and agree to disagree on the Borg-like conformity. You know what I mean? But I do think it's going to happen. I always wanted, humans to figure out, no, we're all going to become individuals. But that's just not how nature and evolution goes. I mean, the slime mold that has something similar to veins turns into, the sponge, which turns into these plants, which turns into Venus flytrap, and with motor functions that are faster in animals. And so the next step is that humans are just cells in this Borg-like super being, hive being, and if you don't like to be a part of that, then you're just going to have to learn how to be the bacteria. Or, yeah, be an anarcho-primitivist.
Well, I mean, I
and
definitely
just
do
become
agree.
a slime mold out in the wild.
Yeah, I think it's more likely that
I mean, like, part of my
AI and
frustrations
like robots
happen
are
to
just
be
gonna
with
take
the people
over
that
and
think that
eventually,
we're going to evolve into something
render
more
people extinct.
elegant and grander, which I sort of completely disagree with. I mean, ants haven't really evolved in the past maybe million years. I mean, they're still ants. They've reached this critical point in which they've been able to survive, right? I mean, they haven't been more elegant or intelligent in the past million years, in a sense.
Well, what do you mean? It's like with humans, we haven't gotten more intelligent, so they say, in like the last 100,000 years, right? But we've developed language, and we've changed a lot. And I think ants have done the same thing. Like when the ants that are tending aphids, which is now many kinds of ants do this tending of these other bugs and milking them. That happens in the last hundreds of millions of years, and you know what I mean. They're just, even roaches are a perfect example. They haven't changed really at all, and I don't think their style of living has changed. But all that really means is they're putting the effort into the fine tuning. They're tuning chemical like antibodies and just subtle things that are they already have such a good solution, and I think that that's the way with ants. let me add this, though, is that I think saying that we is an insult, like the Borg. I mean, it's not supposed to be good. I'm a big 20th century, and I'm the individual, James Dean, you know. So to me, I mean, I took that as bad news, that really, when I was in my 20s or 18s, I would have wanted to defeat this conformity, you know, people that want to conform. And I just don't think now, though, that that's realistic. I think the people that like to conform are going to, and they're going to continue to be in the majority. And the reason is because there's this force in evolution that creates superorganisms. Is a bacteria colony, very sophisticated. So I just think it has to happen again. And the only good news would be that, you know, not everybody has to become that way. You can, like all multicellular forms are, eukaryotic life, and that's what protozoas are. You know, the bacteria aren't, but the protozoas and stuff, you know, I mean, that solution that allowed the communication, that allowed the superorganism, it did not remove the ability to be an individual. Single-celled life forms that have that ability also exist as single-celled life forms. So if that's what suits you, you'll be able to continue that.
Ah, whatever, you're full of shit, Pyrrho. Yep, full of shit, full of shit, full of shit, full of shit.
Well, I was just saying that we are bacteria with brains.
Smart enough, and doggone it.
Stop that. Anyway,
Gary, you always, you abandon this idea that we're bacteria with brains. I mean, I carry on with that, and you just don't seem to, we're bacteria with brains, right? No?
Yeah, but the whole point is we're bacteria with a scheming device, okay? The brain isn't being used to develop our ambitions or our desires. Our brains are being used to fulfill our ambitions and desires. The ambitions of a bacteria. Well, I know. Well, the bacteria doesn't have any very good ambitions. Bacteria have stupid ambitions.
No, what I was saying, though, is that society is a real thing, and it's going to become a hive because that's what bacteria do.
No, they
don't.
Make slime not necessarily.
Mold, and they make mammals.
Well, I know, but the colonization thing, they end up being slaves, right? Our liver is a slave. Our liver isn't free. It's a bunch of slaves. No. Well, I'm just saying, is that a good thing? No, it's not a good thing.
No, I'm not. That's what I was just explaining. It's not as a good thing. For example, with the eukaryotic life, right? All plants, us, we're all eukaryotic. They have certain cellular, mechanisms. And the mitochondria is one of them. So protozoa are also that. Well, guess what? Our cells live that 7 years or whatever they're famous for, and it's a programmed death like fucking Logan's Run, whereas protozoa, as far as we know, they'll live millions of years. All they have to do is keep having sex every couple years, and they will keep living.
Well, wait a minute. No, that's bullshit, okay? There's no evidence that protozoa, that they have an unlimited lifespan. I've never heard of that. No, that's not true.
Well, they've kept them for decades, and the point is, you can dye them and identify these things, and if they have to keep having sex, and then they will keep cloning themselves.
Well, a clone is not themselves. Well, I'm just saying, a clone is not the individual, okay? Obviously, they all clone themselves. All bacteria are basically clones.
Well, so one of the two clones, well, it splits in two copies. One of those two is the original.
Well, I mean, yeah, you can say it's the original, but you still can't demonstrate for... I mean, obviously, our membranes, or lots of the hardware of our cells, is antique hardware. Okay, you could trace it back.
Well, I don't want to oversell it. I'm just saying that if it doesn't, there's two kinds of sex. Like most bacteria, just splits in two, mitosis. But eukaryotic life, like we are, there's also in the protozoa sex, where they just hook up and they don't clone. They just share genetic material. It's obviously a precursor of what the sperm and egg are doing, right? And they just swap some. If they keep doing that, the sex part, where they swap some genes, they will be able to keep cloning. If they don't, they die off. In the body, however, in the human body, there's apoptosis, where the cells are programmed to die, like Logan's Run, and that is the dark side of if you're in some superorganism with a constant temperature.
I know,
and
but
you're pampered.
obviously, there's no reason to believe that the cloning would be necessary for maintenance of your existence. So I'm just saying they die because they're also programmed to die. So I just don't believe that that's necessarily true. I think there are elements of their...
They're not.
Well, I'm just saying. You're saying they're not. I'm saying they probably are. But whatever. It doesn't really... It's not terribly...
but I don't want to disagree
terribly,
on... Maybe you're right. But what I'm saying is what they've seen is if they are able to have the sex version, then they keep going on. They don't shrivel up and die. Now, one of the activities they do is mitosis, where they split in two. That's just something they do if they live. But even when they're not doing that, they continue to live, whereas if they don't swap genes with some other cell, they will die after a couple years.
I know,
and
but
they definitely can live longer than a human body cell.
Well, I'm just saying,
So,
but
and they
a
don't
human
have
body cell
apoptosis.
isn't any kind of comparison anyway, okay? Because we know that death was something that had to be invented really early in the genus of life, okay? That the only way you could have reproduction was to have death. So life had to create
Could
the
we
concept.
discuss if that's true? Maybe you're right.
Okay, it had to invent death to avoid the consequences of reproduction. So that's one of the built-in structures that's really antique and built
Let's
into
talk about that.
all organisms. Well, what I'm saying is what happens when you combine chromosomes is that you create new endings on the genes, all right? It's the endings on the genes that are the things that cause the aging process. And so what I'm saying is that when you create the clone will have a new life because it gets a new chunk of genetic code, and the new gene has new endings on it. So it'll last longer. So I'm just saying there is a renewing effect that happens through the process. I mean, I'm just saying that aging is...
Let's discuss this.
Aging and death is a very old genetic function.
Very old.
Very old
It's
genetic
very old.
function.
But it doesn't go all the way back to the beginning of life.
It goes back.
It's an
It goes
invention.
back to. I'd say it goes back all the way to like the first million years. All right, because the first. Think about it, the first
Think about it,
replicators.
Gary. Let me give you some examples, some arguments that you'll probably know. Okay, some of these animals and fish, some fish that just grow bigger and bigger as long as the pond they're in is big enough, and they live longer and longer and just grow bigger and bigger and wait for nature to kill them. A lot of primitive life forms and worms, they have these kind of characteristics. Single-celled life forms often have that characteristic. They let the environment take them out.
Oh, I'm just sorry.
But
There's no immortals, Pyrrho. Okay, the oldest living things on Earth are trees.
Right.
Okay, 2,000-year-old
No, of course there's
trees.
no immortals because eventually nature will take you out.
No, it's
but we're
not.
talking about
No, no, that's just not true. They won't live forever.
I'm not saying what's true. I want to discuss the
I
ideas.
understand, but the idea is that those things have re-evolved to a new environment. The point is that they originally evolved to be mortal because the mortality was built into the most earliest genetic function. You had to create death to create reproduction. Obviously, the first organisms constantly overpopulated the environment. They suffocated themselves, and they died in their own shit. Okay, and so that's
exactly.
Right, so they had to have a mechanism. They had to have a mechanism to grind up the old versions because they had to make room for the new versions. That's how evolution works.
Right.
The only way you could have fast evolution is you have to have a lot of mutations, you have to produce a lot of offspring, and that means you have to kill the parents.
Right, but you said the first million, and I think it's the last billion, because out of the 13 billion, we had these single-celled life forms until eukaryotic life came along, and then we started to have
but the single cells,
and that's the last half billion, right?
I know, but the algae had to have a mortality because they themselves had to moderate their own exponential. They all have exponential.
Let me just ask you questions. Okay. I don't want to disagree yet. What I'm saying is, okay, you're saying the algae had to have it. I agree it had to have it. Why? Because it started off just growing like algae grows, and they all ate each other's shit and died off. So the ones that were smart enough to commit suicide on a schedule, actually the mathematics is such that, well, great, we had a higher youthful, healthy population, and so they had to eventually learn it, but I actually think it took, 5, 10 billion years.
But it's a
and it's just the last billion or
Yeah.
so that we've had multicellular life that really is,
Well, that's
you're right.
not a
If you were
question.
talking about mammals
You're
and
making
stuff,
a
I'd say it's
speech.
all about dying.
No, it's all about dying in microbes, because the whole point of evolution, the whole way evolution works, okay, is to reward aggressive replication, aggressive mutation. You want to create
You're
more
talking about
mutations.
rewarding death.
Well, the
You're
point.
talking about evolution rewarding suicide.
No,
Okay,
no, Pyrrho. You're talking about evolution rewarding replication. The idea is to create a copy. That's the function of your existence, is to create copies of yourself. The function of your existence is not to live forever.
Wait, okay, let me ask you this. So you're saying that it's not rewarding long life. Okay, you're saying that you want to die because since it's rewarding replication, dying gets you out of the way and makes
It makes room for your offspring. Your modified enhanced genetic code is the thing that's important. Enhanced genetic code is the only thing valued by evolution.
Well,
so enhancements to genetic
what
code.
we disagree on is how long it took to figure that out.
Well, I'm just saying it had to happen early because the life would have killed itself. It would have gone through too many extinctions, and one of those extinctions would have finished it off. I think there's lots of circumstances. Yeah, I think it was one of the biggest hurdles that life had to get through was the initial phase where it changed the atmosphere. It replicated so aggressively that it created an atmosphere of shit. Okay, the first microbes created the oxygen in the atmosphere. They were suffocating in that oxygen, and if they didn't evolve to eat that shit, they would have died. So the first living things would have died off, suffocated in their own shit, if they hadn't evolved to eat their own shit. So they had to learn how to eat their own shit to be able to survive into the future.
Yeah, Gary, why are you even giving me these ancillary arguments? I mean, this isn't even shit that you should even be talking about.
Apparently Pyrrho wants to talk about it, so big deal, Bandit. I mean, I talk about a lot of different things. I mean, it's not totally uninteresting. Okay, the mechanisms of evolution. So it's relevant to that subject. So it's worth talking about. I think that the primary function of evolution. The primary function of evolution is to perpetuate the existence of enhanced genetic code. It's not just your code, it's enhanced code. Okay, that's the real objective, is for you to produce offspring that are better than yourself. That's how evolution works.
Basically, you and I agree that the mechanism is that now, and you have to get out of the way for offspring, and you need offspring to perpetuate, and a bunch of old people trying to make it immortal is not as good a chance as just new offspring that are young. So,
well, it's not just that they're young. It's Pyrrho, stop. You're missing the key point, though. The point isn't that they're just young. The point is that they're better. The offspring are better.
They're not always better. Sometimes
I know, but that's the whole point, though. That's the whole point of evolution, is to make 1 million shitty copies and make one enhanced copy. So for the one enhancement in the Nietzschean kind of mold, you sacrifice 1 million babies that you kill, so you can have the one little one that has a super double antenna or something. So the one good enhancement, the one good error, okay, is kept. And the price tag is you annihilate, you torture 1 million offspring to have that one enhancement. That's how evolution works, and it's insidious. It's an insidious blueprint of let me destroy 99% of life. Let me kill it, wipe it out, destroy it, so I can create one enhancement in the genetic code. So for that one tiny enhancement, you pay a huge price in failures. You have a million failures for one enhancement.